Welcome to Storm Tracker, your eye on the storm of your Carolina Hurricanes, and your home for the best insight and analysis to keep you totally informed on what's happening with the Canes. Whether it's the latest news on the ice or off the ice, we've got you covered. Now let's begin. Here's your host, Tom Ray.
Well, Carolina Hurricanes have been on a tear lately, going 11-1-2 in their last 14 games and sit in first place overall in the Eastern Conference. Canes have been firing on all cylinders, and their power play has been second best in the league since December 1st. Hurricanes are well positioned to make a strong run for the Cup, and today the Canes made another small move to try to improve their chances of going deep. Joining me to talk about this and more, of course, our hockey savants, Erin and Katie. Ladies.
Hello there.
Okay, so trade deadline, we'll talk a little bit about it in a few minutes. Looks like it was underwhelming for the Hurricanes. They made one move, and we'll talk about that. But I wanted to just spend a few minutes to talk about the Canes' play recently. Of course, they've been on a tear, as I mentioned. They've been playing great hockey. In fact, the only game they've lost in their last 14 in regulation was a tough loss to the Seattle Kraken, 2-1, on their Western trip. Otherwise, they've been pulling points out of all these games. What are we thinking about their play? Erin?
Well, I think that, when you go back with the, just as far back as the Olympic break, they had two really good games at home, and then, they've lost just one game on the road. It was a winnable game, so that's always a little disappointing when they tend to drop a winnable game. But there again, you have to factor in the long travel and the adjustment to the time zones and all those usual things that we talk about when they first start a Western road trip. So they came back very well in their next game. So, I think that they're doing a good job. And as someone said earlier, even if they split these road games and wins and losses, it wouldn't be the worst thing because of how well they're positioned and how many points they are. I believe they are 9 points ahead of their next.
They are.
Challenger. So this has been, it's been fun to see them get back into action. I think the Olympic break felt very long for those of us that missed the Hurricanes and missed watching them play. I think that there are still some areas I think we could look at and say, yeah, we'd like to see them tighten up here and get a little better there. But as they make their final push, the biggest factor that's going to be affecting them is this insane schedule in March where they have so many games to play in the single month. So that's the same thing for everyone. Everyone is in the same boat with that. And the Canes should be well positioned to keep going and keep making the fans happy on a nightly basis.
For sure. And, the power play has been just incredible. I mean, you look at the last couple of months and the numbers are off the charts. They're sitting in 10th right now in the NHL. And we remember on December 5th, I think it was, we did a podcast and they were 30th. Sitting at 13.7%. So they've come way up. They've really been driving an incredible amount of opportunity with that power play. Katie, what are you seeing with the PP?
I think it all starts with Shane Gostisbehere. He's really been the quarterback through and through for that unit with his puck moving and his vision and his playmaking that he has been providing from the blue line there. And then it seems like finally that top unit has really been clicking. Obviously, we know the story of Jordan Staal being elevated to the power play and winning those faceoffs and providing net front. So I think he's only gotten points on about 5 to 8 power play goals, but he's been on the ice for so many more, providing that net front and providing that big body to screen the goalie's eyes. And that just opens up space and provides more opportunities for the playmakers like Aho and Svech and Jarvis to work with. And they've been connecting with each other quite well. The power play goal at the beginning of the game against Vancouver was just a thing of beauty when Jarvis got that little backhand to Svech, and Svech just ripped it home. And the goalie had no chance on that goal. So it's been great to see that because it's something that the Canes are going to have continue to be strong the rest of the regular season and then into the playoffs. If it falters at any point and dries up, then they're going to be they're going to be hurting a lot more as far as finding success with their wins and loss ratio.
Well, and for sure. And the other power play unit I thought looked pretty darn good the other night as well. Of course, that's quarterbacked by Alexander Nikishin. And they look good. And they're able to get the puck up quickly. Usually Dink Ehlers or Logan Stankoven is making that happen for them. So I think the power play in general is just it's firing on all cylinders right now. And whenever the Canes get an opportunity to go in the power play, it looks like something's happening. So it's great. Now, if we look at the decisions that were made today and the big trade deadline activities that took place, we look at the Hurricanes, and of course, they didn't do a lot. As it turns out, they made one move. Erin, what did they do?
Well, as we all know, they picked up Nick Deslauriers from the Philadelphia Flyers, and that this is a depth player. This is a fourth line left winger who has played for, I think you said 6 teams now in his career, and he's not somebody that's going to put up a lot of points. I think Tom was telling us that he had 10 goals in one of his years early on in his career. But over the last 3 seasons, he has managed to collect a total of 9. So you're not looking for someone who's going to add to depth scoring. That is not going to be his role, and that is not what he is there for. What I like about this move is that I've criticized the Canes in the past for not having a true fourth line. Now, I think we all would have liked to see an upgrade at fourth line center because Mark Jankowski is not a physical player and does not have that snarl that you want from a fourth line center in the playoffs. But you do have Will Carrier on that line, and it's you can kind of pick and choose. Do you want Eric Robinson there for some scoring chances against some of the teams in the early rounds, particularly when there's not as much of a need for that bite, perhaps? And then do you want to bring in someone like Deslauriers for games where there's a lot of heavy physical stuff going on, shenanigans, whatever you want to call it? We don't have the Florida Panthers in our sights this year for the playoffs, so that's a good thing. But there are still teams that make a living, by their fourth lines being that kind of fourth line that's going to get up in your face and try to maybe take a run at the goalie or something like that. So having someone like that on the team, in the locker room, and just in general is going to be good for. I think the players knowing that they've got somebody whose job it pretty much is to be that player. We haven't had that, so that'll be interesting.
Well, the other thing we heard was that Rod Brind'Amour seemed to like this player. Katie, did you hear something along those lines?
Yeah. The rumor basically was that it's been somebody he's been interested in adding to the Canes for the past couple of seasons, and I have no reason to say that that's not true, but I find it a bit puzzling because it doesn't seem like Deslauriers' profile fits with a traditional Canes style, especially since Brind'Amour seems to coach his players to avoid getting scrappy so that they don't draw those extra penalties. And I think that's my main concern with Deslauriers is whether or not his play is going to be disciplined enough to provide a positive result on the ice for the Canes. That's where this is the most puzzling for me is I don't see how his upside is greater than that of a Robinson or Carrier. And even with the toughness or the edge, I think those other two fill that role better. So I guess he's just depth. It'll be interesting to see how he's used moving forward. It's always good to have an extra body there in case of injury. But so we'll see how it goes. We'll see how Rod decides to deploy him now that he's got his man.
Well, Deslauriers is a big player. He's 6'1", but he's 218 pounds. So he is a guy that brings size for sure. And I think maybe it's a little bit of insurance because the two guys that patrol those wings, as we both know, they're kind of brittle. Both Robinson and Carrier have had serious injury issues in the past. And my feeling is they're thinking, hey, we like that fourth line as a heavy line that can get in and, work hard on the forecheck. Don't care about the offense. Just get in there and make something happen. And I think, he's insurance if one of those two guys goes down. So, I don't expect we'll see much of him. I have no expectation of that unless there are injuries, in which case we could see a lot of Deslauriers on that fourth line. So it's great. And the cost for Deslauriers was a 7th-round pick, which, quite frankly, is really nothing in the end, right? So that's fine. He's a UFA at the end of this year. He won't come back next year. This will be it for him. So the Canes made that one move. We had talked a lot about possible other moves. One of the areas I did want to talk about was goaltending. We had some questions because a lot of folks have been talking about the Canes' interest in goaltenders recently. The pundits, they're out there, looking at who might go where. And the Canes were rumored to be in discussions all over the place, but they did not make a move. Erin, what are we thinking about with the goaltending? I mean, Brandon Bussi, he's the fastest ever to get to 25 in just 29 games. What are we thinking right now?
Well, I think that they have enough confidence in both Bussi and Frederik Andersen to be happy with the situation as it is. We don't really know, and nobody knows, how Bussi will fare in the playoffs because this will be his first crack at them. He's never been a playoff goaltender in the NHL before. So, we'll have to see how that, if the tempo of the games, the elevated aggression, especially offensively from some of these really high-powered offensive teams, how is that going to play out, and how big of a role does the Canes' team defense in general and their blue line specifically have to play in making sure that Bussi isn't overwhelmed in these playoff situations. So that's something that I'm sure they'll be working on down the stretch, very much so. But I think that they also feel very confident in Frederik Andersen. Freddie was very good with Team Denmark. He's certainly not a goaltender who is going to get rattled by any kind of pressure. And they may be alternating them more than they typically have alternated goaltenders in the playoffs. That is something that I think we all have seen in the past. There was the 1 year, a couple of years ago, when it seemed like Freddie was getting a lot of starts in a row, even though things weren't necessarily going that well. So, they don't have to do that anymore. They can certainly switch between Freddie and Bussi anytime they feel the need to do so. And I think that that's something that they may be, more inclined to consider because they both have done well with the rotation. So hopefully that will be the case. I think a lot of people, and this is surprising but interesting, a lot of people do expect Frederik Andersen to be the goaltender of choice in game one, round one. Yeah. So that will be interesting if they do that, because that will show that, where their thinking is on that, but we won't know till we get there. As far as not picking up anybody as a backup or an extra, I think that's where they look down at their, goaltending depth in the AHL and say, if Caden Primo needs to come up and play a game, it's not going to kill him. It's not going to, if it's not, as long as it's just one or two or something like that, but that would require losing both Bussi and Andersen. Right. And I mean, any team that's in that situation where they have lost two goaltenders is going to be in a world of hurt. So if Primo had to come up as a backup for a game or two, there's no issue there. You don't need to go spending draft picks and assets to pick up somebody else to be a bench warmer in case of a goaltender being out for a game or two. So I think we're good.
Well, it's interesting because I was just laughing thinking about, Spencer Martin and Dustin Tokarski come to mind. The time the Canes actually did lose both of their goalies. Let's be honest. Caden Primo is having an incredible year. He's won 12 straight for Chicago. He's seventh in the league in 9-12 save percentage and goals against average at .252. He's just playing incredible, and I think that was part of what the Canes are thinking. In the conversation I had with Spiros Anastas last week, he was saying this guy is he's lights out right now. So if they're sitting there, they're thinking, am I giving something up? What am I getting that's better? There's probably not much they could do. So I think I agree with you. I think the goaltending's fine. A little bit concerned with Brandon Bussi the last couple of games. He's been letting in more goals. Now, some of them are weird where it goes off somebody's stick in front or, friendly fires, they call it. But he hasn't been quite as sharp. And that's since coming back after the break. So maybe he's just got to get his mojo going again and start winning some games again the way he has with some of those great saves. He's winning anyway, but the Canes are giving him lots of goals, tremendous goal support. And speaking of that, if we look at the lineup now, and we've really tried to look at this and say, where are the Canes? Where do they need help? And we talked about 2C repeatedly, and maybe some more strength up on the forward side. They chose not to do that or could not get that done today. We saw Nikolai Ehlers with a hat trick the other night. That's great. But Katie, what are you thinking about the forward crew? Are they good enough?
Maybe. I know that's not a very helpful answer, but I think they're fine for the rest of the season. I mean, there's a reason that the Canes are in first in the East right now. Yeah. It's not bad. I think Tulsky in his press conference said something along the lines of the Canes have 3 of the top 40, I think, centers as far as 5v5 production in the league. And so it's not like they're hurting for production from their main guys, who he considers to be those, like the order in which he would label those 3, I'm sure is different, who's the 2C and who's the 3C in reality. But part of it just comes down to the fact that I think that consistency is the big question mark, right? We know that Aho's line is going to produce, but after that, the Stankoven line and the Staal line have been producing in fits and spurts. And so now the Stankoven line is hot. They are producing well. They're creating lots of chances. They're having great possession numbers as far as the stats are concerned. But the Staal line has gone kind of quiet since we've gotten back from break. Yeah. And so it's that sort of thing where what happens if they both go quiet at the same time, and in the playoffs, a team can focus in on shutting down Aho and Svech and Jarvis, and then where's the production going to come from? Do they have the depth scoring to be able to counteract that, as well as the defense to also shut down the other team and make it a bit more of a slugfest? That's been their Achilles heel the past few playoffs, and it very well could be the same song and dance moving forward. We'll just have to see.
I think the way the Canes are built now, I think special teams are going to be absolutely critical. The fact that the power play is firing all cylinders right now, that's going to be a must-have going into the playoffs, because exactly what you're saying. 5-on-5, it's going to be tough slugging. You know that the top line is going to have all kind of coverage on it. And, historically in the playoffs, if we look back, it's your bottom 6. It's your third and fourth line that seem to kind of step in and make a difference. And I think that's going to be a question on how that works out for the Hurricanes. I am excited about William Carrier in the playoffs this year. He's a guy that he's had success before with Vegas, and the way he plays is ideal for the playoffs. And he's a guy that can and he can chip in here and there. And of course, Eric Robinson he's shown a lot this year offensively. So, it could be that line can help a little bit. And that I don't know which the third line is anymore on the Hurricanes. If we say it's the Stankoven line, then I think they should be able to deliver a bit as well. Okay, so if we look at that and we feel like, there'll be some challenges. The Canes did not add anything measurable to improve their chances. Then we take a look at some of the teams that I think the Canes are going to be possibly going up against. And we start with the East, and we take a look at the moves that were made today. And starting it off, let's talk about Tampa Bay. They didn't do much either. So, I don't think they've improved themselves measurably today. The only move they made that I've seen is Corey Perry. So Tampa is a team that I think is probably in the same place as us. They haven't really improved, so that's fine. And we're in a pretty good position versus the Lightning, I think. One of the teams that we've talked a lot about in the past, kind of offline, and it looks like they're making their move, is the Buffalo Sabres. And the Sabres did make some significant moves. They added 2 veteran big defensemen, including Logan Stanley from Winnipeg, and he's a monster at 6'7", former first-round pick of the Jets, and Luke Schenn, who's been around forever, and he's been in lots of playoff action. Another big, heavy right-shot defenseman. And they added Sam Carrick from the Rangers. He's a solid fourth liner. He's a good fourth line guy. What do we think about the Sabres? Is that a team that we kind of look up and say, hey, wait a minute, they're concerning? Erin?
Well, I think my biggest concern is not necessarily the moves they made today or even their run of success that they've had, because it's been an impressive run without making these moves. So, some people think these moves might actually weaken them, with that whole team cohesion and everything else that you get. So who knows? But my concern is that this is a team that is going to be running extremely high on the momentum and the vibes, if you will, of making the playoffs for the first time in 14 years. This is a huge thing. And I don't think, we like to look at the tangibles, all the stats and the data, but when you talk about the intangibles that can't be measured, it's hard to measure the impact on a team of finally making it to the playoffs after a long slog of living in this nightmare of never getting close or never getting high enough, you think about some of the really talented players that they've seen come and go in that time frame. I mean, Jack Eichel, of course, comes to mind as the biggest loss that they probably had. But yeah. So you can go down the list. There's a ton of them, former Buffalo Sabres that are playing on cup contending teams elsewhere and making a difference. So for them to be there, for them to have this emotional uplift of saying we finally made it, and I don't think you can just rule them out and say that they're going to be an easy first round exit or anything like that. I think they're going to challenge a little bit harder than people think. So the moves they've made to get like you said, a little bit bigger, a little bit fill in some of those gaps. I don't see them as actually hurting them. Maybe in the long run, when they start looking at the cost of the acquisitions on some of those, that might be a little bit painful. But this was a year for them to do that. This was a year for them to send the message to the locker room that says, you stepped up, you did this, you got here, so here's your reinforcements. And I like that message for the Sabres.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. They're very deep. They've got a lot of offense. And they roll three pretty darn good centers if you have Tage Thompson, or sometimes it's Peyton Krebs. And then you've got Dylan Cousins and you've got Josh Norris. You got some pretty darn good center icemen on that team. And so they can put the puck in the net for sure. I think the challenge the Sabres are going to have is goaltending. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Alex Lyon are their guys, and I don't think either one of those guys is necessarily going to take you to where you want to go. But they will be a tough out, and so we need to keep an eye on them. Another team we've talked about a lot is the New York Islanders, and the Islanders, of course, play a certain style of game, and it's kind of tough. They're heavy on the checking and defense side, and they do have an outstanding goaltender in Elias Sorokin. They made a good move today. They picked up Braden Shen. Katie, thoughts on the Islanders?
I definitely think that the Islanders are going to be a more difficult out than they have been in the past. And a lot of that has to do with the dynamics that Patrick Waugh has brought since he joined them as head coach. It's not the same old that we saw back when the Canes were eliminating the Islanders in the first round of the playoffs a couple years ago. So he's reworked them and built them up. I still don't think they're quite ready to be a true cup contender. They're more of a cup wannabe. But that doesn't mean that team doesn't have teeth and can't hurt you if whoever's playing them is complacent around them. I don't know that these moves particularly move the needle as far as I'm concerned for them. Maybe round them out a little bit more, but I don't think it makes them significantly better. And especially because they let Drouin go in the deal for Shen. I know Drouin has been having a real struggle this season and a downswing, but he's still a weapon that can show up. And when he shows up, he can be valuable, and they don't have that anymore. So we'll see how that goes with the Islanders, but with Waugh behind the bench, don't count them out.
I just happened to see that this is something that when we were just talking about goaltending for the Canes, and we were talking about them not making a move. Tulke just said in his presser that Pyotr Kochetkov may be in the mix for the playoffs. So his recovery is progressing well, and they may have him back as a potential playoff third option. So that would kind of explain why all these insiders that thought the Canes were going to make a move on goaltending didn't have the full information in front of them. So, and certainly this is news to us, and it's really good news. So I wanted to share it.
Fantastic.
Isn't that funny? Because we were talking about that recently, and we're saying, hey, is there an outside chance that Pyotr could be back, because if you look at the timeline for the type of injury, it's usually 4 to 6 months. So, right. And he's been walking around the team lately. So it's great. Well, okay. That is good news today. So the Islanders and Tony DeAngelo, I'm not as concerned, but I do like Tony D, of course. That's great. One last team in the East I thought we'd cover. And Katie, this, again, looking at Detroit, Justin Falk picked up today. What do you think about the Red Wings?
I mean, it makes their defense a little bit better, which was perhaps some of where they were suspect beyond Seider. Obviously, Seider's great. He's a phenomenal defenseman. But again, I'm not sure with their – I don't know that I believe that they have the goaltending to take them very far. I think they'll struggle a little bit getting past some of the big dogs. Hopefully the group in the Atlantic just kind of beats each other up before whoever – emerges victorious would hopefully face the Canes. Hopefully the Canes will get that far that they can be once again in the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know. It doesn't, again, I'm sounding like a broken record here, but I don't feel like there's been that major piece that's been added to any of the teams in the East. Perhaps not really anybody. It's kind of been a dud of a deadline overall as far as big impact moves and players. But outside of Larkin and Raymond, who are the big threats on the Red Wings? I think you shut down their top line and you shut down the entire team. Yeah.
Well, no, they do have Alex DeBrincat, who is very dangerous, and Patrick Kane on occasion.
Patrick Kane. Sure.
Yeah. So they do have some offense. I'm not as concerned about the Red Wings simply because the team is, to me, it's kind of a fragile team at times. And I think they're going to have their challenges. Now, Erin, looking at the standings today, who would the Canes play in the first round?
I don't know.
I want to say last time I looked, it was the Bruins.
Yeah, I think it is the Bruins.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So the Bruins did nothing. I think the Bruins are definitely a team that we can handle quite nicely. So again, looking at the East right now, if I was to summarize what I think I've heard today, the only team that we're really seriously considering as a concern is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Is that fair?
I think so. Yeah. And of course, their one move that they did make today is the most dangerous move a team can make. For those of us that are hoping to make it to the Cup final, they added Corey Perry, and Corey Perry has a history of getting his team to the Stanley Cup final and then losing. So if that was to happen again, then there would be no move the Canes could possibly have made to outdo whatever powerful voodoo is going on there with Corey Perry. But no, really, seriously, though, when you look at the Lightning, they are a team that the Canes have at times struggled to match. Their offense is so potent, and their defense is certainly very good as well. So they're a team. And then on top of that, you have the goaltending that, I know Vasilevsky has struggled this year, but I don't see any reason to think that playoff vibes won't kick in for him when he gets to them. So if they stay healthy, I think they're the biggest threat to the Canes in the East.
I mean, Braden Point he's feasted on the Hurricanes, something awful.
Yes. Yes.
And you've got Kucherov, who's the best player right now in the league, in my view. Those guys are something else. And again, they just got Victor Hedman back, so their defensive core is really rounding into shape. And they were winning all those games without him, for goodness sakes. He was out for weeks. So we know that they're a tough team. So, yeah, the Lightning, I think, right now are the team that we're going to want to keep an eye on. Mm-hmm. Now, going west, I think we have to start with your team, Katie, and have some fun with the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche made a number of moves. Most significant, I think, was Nicholas Waugh. With Toronto. Well, he was actually a Cane farmhand at one time, played a few games with the Canes back in the day. Big centerman. He plays with size. He likes to get in, make things happen. He's had 4 30-point plus seasons. He's not a huge offensive guy, but he's not going to hurt you out there. And you got a couple of others. What are you thinking about with the Avalanche? How do you feel about those guys?
Not overwhelmed, but not underwhelmed either. Just whelmed, I guess. the Nick Waugh deal definitely addresses an issue that the Avs have been saying that they want, where they have liked Jack Drury at 3C and thought he's been quite serviceable. But by putting Waugh in there, that allows Drury to shift down into the 4C role and gives them a proper centered depth, because who they had been cycling out of that 4C spot just really wasn't doing it as far as what they needed, both production-wise and puck management-wise. Yeah. So now Drury goes from being a serviceable 3C to an elite 4C, and Waugh will be able to pick up the mantle on that third line. And then as far as the depth of defense, they traded a little while ago for Brett Kulak, who's had a few games in an Avs sweater, and he's been good. Yes. He's been very solid and given them some more balance. And then they traded for Nick Blankenberg out of Nashville, who gives them another, I guess, their 7th D, who can come in and be a puck-moving defenseman if one of their other righties like Makar or Burns or Malinsky go down and they need somebody to fill in for their role. So it's good. It's depth. It makes them more well-rounded. Happy to move forward with this crew that, as the Canes have been the best in the East so far, so the Avs have been the best in the West and overall in the NHL. So hopefully it just makes them better and stronger as they move forward into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, the benefit for the Avalanche, of course, is they didn't give any players up from their current roster. So this is all ads. Kulak, they did. Of course, they gave up, what's his name?
Gerard.
Yeah, Gerard. Yeah, Sam Gerard. They gave up Sam Gerard. I think Kulak was an upgrade for sure defensively. And Nick was just a straight upgrade. So, yeah, if anything today, they're better than they were yesterday. So that's not great news. For the Hurricane side. Let's look at another team that I think is really on the rise, and that's the Minnesota Wild. Now, the Wild did the big move to get Quinn Hughes, and that changed the rules for them. They have a heck of a team right now, and they've got great goaltending. They made some moves. They got a hulking center iceman out of Nashville, Michael McCarron. He's a solid guy, face-offs, very strong, over 52%, his history in the NHL. He's a guy that's going to add some size to their roster and a solid fourth line guy. Bobby Brink, who I really liked with Philadelphia, they picked him up today as well, and veteran Nick Foligno. So they've added some players again. They didn't give up really anything off the roster. Erin, thoughts on the Minnesota Wild?
I think the Wild are one of those teams that, they've had so many years of getting into the playoffs, and then, the West being what it is, they immediately, make an early exit or barely hang on for a second. They're not, they haven't had what they've needed. But like you said, Quinn Hughes changed the rules on that. You add a superstar player, your team changes dramatically. And I think we've seen that in how they've played. These moves are only going to bolster that. So, but they're in the West, and they have an incredible hill to climb to get all the way through to a Stanley Cup final. So I think that it's going to be fun to watch them be an actual player. Maybe not as fun for Katie.
Hey, if they can beat up the Dallas Stars, I'm here for it.
You might have a better chance with the Wild than the Stars, the way that things have gone for the Avs lately. So, but yeah, as far as worrying about how they're going to do or anything like that, I think that's going to be it's going to be a work in progress to get these guys in and get them up to speed. And that is one of those things that we always talk about with deadline moves, is that players have to come in and assimilate quickly. So I'm sure that Nick Foligno won't have any issues there. It'd be like you said, he's a veteran, he knows what he's doing. The other guys may take a little time to settle in and figure out where they're going to be. But they made good moves, so it's interesting to watch.
Yeah, and if we move on to the other team that I think is right at the top of the list as far as the West is concerned, and that's the Dallas Stars. And the Stars picked up a couple of guys this week. Big defenseman Tyler Myers from the Vancouver Canucks. He's a right shot guy, solid. And Michael Bunting, who we know a lot about from his days with the Hurricanes. Katie, what are your thoughts about Dallas?
Oh, I have so many thoughts about Dallas. But as far as these particular grades, Bunting's going to be a pain in the rear.
Yes.
He's going to basically fulfill the role that Marchment played for them last year.
Right.
And that's, that'll be a double-edged sword, right? He'll take a lot of penalties. It could end up costing Dallas, but he also could end up drawing some penalties and getting under the team's skin and being annoying and throwing other players off their game. So it's just depends on which way that cuts for them. Yes. Myers, I'm not as impressed with. I know everybody loves the big defenseman, but I don't think he's particularly strong defensively. I don't think it helps the Stars in overabundance as far as that's concerned, other than him just having a little bit bigger reach than your average guy. We'll see how that goes, but they needed somebody. Yeah. That Myers is not going to get a ton of play time. That will go to their top four for the most part. But I just, like I said before, with the Wild and the Stars, I just want the Avs to keep their top seed and let the two of them duke it out in the first round and beat each other up, so the Avs have a good chance of taking care of whoever comes out of that matchup alive.
Well, the other team that, when we look at the West, the other team that certainly mentioned generally is the Vegas Golden Knights. And this was kind of a rare trade deadline because normally the Golden Knights pull off some massive trade. I mean, we've seen it for years. And this year they didn't really do much. They acquired Nick Dowd from the Washington Capitals. Dowd's a third, fourth line guy, 10 goals plus his last 5 seasons in a row. He's a good, solid guy. Can fill a role for them. They've been missing William Karlsson for an extended period, and they needed help down the middle. Cole Smith was a kind of a fourth line guy with Nashville. Again, hard worker, good skater, this kind of stuff. So they basically wanted to fill certain roles on the team. What are we thinking about Vegas, Erin?
Well, I hear some rumblings from Vegas Golden Knight fans on Twitter because they're very active there, and they haven't been as happy with how their team has been doing this year. A lot of them didn't think that, they didn't think that they looked like a team that was going to make a deep run. And when you look at what they've done as far as their acquisitions, like you said, they didn't. The message there, like I was talking about the message the Sabres were getting from their GM. The message coming to the Vegas Golden Knights from their GM is very different. Yeah. Because like you said, this is a year that they haven't gone all in and loaded up on people and managed somehow with no cap space whatsoever to acquire a lot of players. And on that topic, we all know that the GMs were complaining that the new rule change that does not allow them to, add quite so freely at the deadline by use of LTIR has hampered some of these GMs. And I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas was one of them, since they were one of those teams that frequently made use of that little loophole. But even so, even without the loophole, I feel like Vegas would like to just kind of get into the playoffs and see where it takes them, but that they don't have that same feeling about this team that they've had about their team in the recent past in terms of who they can get past and get through. And when you look at what the West has been and how difficult it's been for anyone to close in on the Avalanche in terms of where they are in the standings, you kind of see that. So it'll be interesting to see how they do, but they may not be a team that goes very far this year, and that'll be kind of a new experience for some fans.
Well, it'll be a huge difference, and I know there's an injury to a couple of their guys that they're struggling with, and I think at this stage, again, they can't use the LTIR trick that they've used repeatedly, and that's changed all the rules for them actually. So as we take a look at kind of wrapping up today and the deadline and everything that's taken place, do we feel that the Canes are in a more disadvantageous position than when they started? Are we really kind of sitting here upset and saying, hey, this was just a bad day? Or what are we thinking? Katie?
I think the Canes are in a good position, but that has less to do with what they didn't do as it does just the day as a whole, especially out east. Right. I think for the most part, they've done really well for themselves this season, and there's no reason to believe that they can't continue doing well, definitely through the end of the regular season. The question just becomes, are they going to be good enough come playoffs? Are they going to regress the way that they've regressed in the past, or do they have the fortitude, as well as perhaps an easier path without the Panthers in the mix this season, to finally beating their Eastern Conference Finals demons and making it to a Stanley Cup we'll see. We certainly hope so. That would be fantastic. But there are a lot of hurdles still yet to come, and we'll see exactly how they respond to the adversity that is for sure coming their way.
Erin, what's your wrap up to the trade deadline?
Well, I think that it's, one of those trade deadlines where you look at, and again, I'm going to go back to the point I've made about the Sabres and the Knights. What is the message from the front office? Because the message that Tulsky is giving is that we felt that there were moves that we could make, but it would cost too much for now and in the future, and that's why it didn't make sense. It wasn't just cost for now and for in the future. So that means that teams were asking, they were in on Vincent Trocheck right up to the last minute, but clearly the Rangers wanted things that the Canes weren't willing to give up, and that might have been Bradley Nadeau. We don't know. We have no idea, but it could have been prospects. It could have been draft picks. I would think it would have to be players. I think it would have to be either some players or some prospects that they didn't want to give up. And so that's where you kind of say, well, without knowing what they were asked to give up, you can't really criticize the decision, in the microcosm. Yeah. But looking at the big picture, the message that the front office sent to the Canes is that, essentially, you don't need reinforcements. You don't need help. You can do this on your own. You have the pieces you need to win. And that can be a positive message for the locker room, certainly, because they can, take from that and say, yeah, we didn't have to lose any of our locker, the guy next to me in the locker room isn't gone tomorrow, So that can be a positive message on the one hand. On the other hand, I think that you have to look at the reality that they're also saying we are not going all in this year, because that's what. So when you're not going all in, you're in the mindset that most GMs have, which is make the playoffs and anything can happen, because it's true. It's true. As much as we want to think that teams can control every factor going into the playoffs, you don't know when injuries are going to strike. You don't know when the other teams are going to be impacted by those same things. You don't know right now, you don't even know for sure who your opponent is going to be. So right. It's a hopeful approach, but it's not an aggressive approach. No. And I think that when I look at that, it makes me smile, because you look at how the Canes are constructed as a team, and that is exactly how their offense works, So it's the mindset of the team as a whole in all these different areas is, do the right things, and you'll eventually be rewarded. Sometimes they think that doing the right things is not doing very much at all, because you don't want to be aggressive. Because if you're aggressive and you're pinching to try to acquire players, then maybe it's going to go the other way, and it's not going to help you. So I think that the philosophy of the Canes is something interesting that should be studied. But as far as what this deadline is, I'm looking at it and saying, okay, we all know what our fears are about how things might not work out. But the Canes have the chance to show us that that's not going to be the situation this year. So it's up to them now.
Well, it was an interesting deadline in that none of the big names moved. So we had Robert Thomas, we had Nazem Kadri, we had, Jordan Kyrou, we had Vincent Trocheck. I can go up and down the list. None of those guys moved. So in the end, there wasn't a deal to be done. Obviously, the rule changes, the things that were changed by ownership and whatever was done to change the rules, where you couldn't have multiple teams, taking cap stuff. You couldn't have folks on LTIR. There are a lot of changes that took place, and it just led everything to this. Now, the one thing I will say is I am delighted that the Canes did not lose Bradley Nadeau or Alexander Nikishin. Okay, those are two guys I did not want to lose. And I don't care who was coming here. I did not want to get up in the morning and say, oh, we just traded Alex Nikishin and ended up with somebody. I don't want to go there. And the other thing I'll mention, just to wrap up my thought on this, the Canes have a lot of players in Chicago that can help. There's no reason that they can't bring up Nadeau, they can't bring up Robidas, they can't bring up some of those other guys, the blue liners. Those guys can play. We've seen them. They're just fine. They're not going to hurt the hockey club. And they're being taught to play the way that, Rod wants to play, which is a full 200-foot game in the forward side. And they can put the puck in the net. So I think the Canes probably sat back and said the options and what we'd have to pay for them don't materially move the needle.
Yeah. This just came across Twitter. Apparently, the Avs got Kadri. He's back.
You're kidding. Oh my goodness! How did they?
No
reports on cost, but wow.
Okay, so that was great. I just went through that complete. About no top players going in
That's
Canada.
okay. This is fun. This is a fluid situation. Our podcasts don't usually go like this, but
well, that actually makes for an interesting scenario with the Avalanche, because if you've got Nathan McKinnon, you've got Brock Nelson, you've got Nick Waugh, and you've got Nazem Kadri, what
happens to Drury? Yeah, is he part of the return?
Oh my, that would be interesting.
Yeah. So that's
there had been reports that the Avs had tried to extend Drury and that he wasn't accepting any of their extension offers. So
but this is going to be weird for Kadri. He's been the first line center and the big minute center for Calgary. He's moving to third line center.
He's definitely not taking McKinnon or Nelson's spot. That's for sure.
That's interesting. We'll have to see where that goes. It would have been more fun if you had said Nazem Kadri was traded to Carolina. Yeah.
That would have been fun too. I would have really been happy with that.
Yeah.
But,
So clearly in the end, probably the Avalanche have done the most when you look at what they've done to improve their team in the areas they need improvement. So that's gonna kind of make it a bit more challenging for the Canes if they go up against the Avalanche. I fully expect the Avalanche will come out of the West. So that's interesting.
I hope so.
Okay, so stuff right to the last minute here. So it's a good podcast.
Not to be lost in it, though. Everything you said, though, about the Canes is absolutely true. And if there was a team that would be well constructed enough to thwart the Avs Stanley Cup aspirations, it would be the Canes.
Yeah.
In the East, because the Canes have the type of system that can absolutely frustrate and disrupt the flow that the Avs like to build in their game. So, that would be the dream, wouldn't it? That would
the
be
Stanley Cup final between those two teams. There you go.
That would be the dream.
I think the other thing, and we started off this whole discussion recognizing the Canes have gone 11-1-2 in their last 14 games. And the fact is this, that they are just playing great hockey, and you don't want to mess with that. And Rod's talked about this numerous times, is that, you don't want to mess with that. And you think about the story of John Carlson leaving Washington, and you've got, players crying, and, you heard Alex Ovechkin saying this is the worst day of my life and all this kind of stuff. So there's, you got to look at the plus minus of the stuff, and maybe standing pat is the right move. And, I have a lot of confidence in Eric Tulsky. I think he's the wizard. So if he thought this was the way to go, I really believe it. So that's fun. We had a lot of fun talking about the deadline. Let's look ahead. What have we got coming up? The Canes complete their road trip playing in Edmonton and Calgary. Calgary minus Nazem Kadri, so that's interesting. And then of course,
that's going to be fun. Yeah.
And they return home to play Pittsburgh and St. Louis, and I will be attending both of those games, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, that's going to be great. So what are we thinking as we look ahead? Katie, why don't you kick it off?
I think the game against Edmonton's definitely going to be the toughest because of obvious reasons. But at the same time, I do think that Edmonton's defense is very, very weak, and that their goaltending isn't strong enough to hold up to that. So if the Canes can keep the puck away from McDavid and Draisaitl and that crew and stifle them and get their chances in the O-zone, then they should be fine. And anything less than total victory against the Flames is unacceptable. They should just go in there and take care of business and call it a road trip and come on home. So I think they need 2 wins. They need to keep padding their lead both in the Metro and in the East, and put themselves in an advantageous position before they come home.
Yeah, and to the Edmonton point, the biggest concern always with the Oilers is their power play. It's one of the best. It is the best, I think, in the league right now. And they are deadly. So if we can stay out of the penalty box, I think that's going to help quite a bit. Erin?
I'm agreeing with Katie on the road trip. I'm looking ahead even just a little bit further. The biggest question I have right now, looking at the schedule through the rest of March, and then of course there's a few games in April. At what point does Rod Brind'Amour start resting some of his players? They have enough depth now. That is another thing about adding Nick Deslauriers. They have plenty of depth that they can put in here and there for a game. So at what point does he say, maybe Jordan Staal needs the night off, or maybe Jordan Martinook needs the night off, and shuffle those lines around a little bit and bring in some of those extra fourth line guys so that we're not getting to the playoffs in a state where, they've all been playing 16, 17 minutes a game and it's, they're at the end of their rope. So we see how good the team looks coming back from a nice long break. And, you want to make sure that it stays that way. So I hope that they will do that. I hope that they will bring guys up, even maybe perhaps a defenseman from Chicago or something, so that a couple of the defensemen can have a night off. We're going to get down the stretch and we're going to get to that point where it's a good idea to do that. First, like Katie said, they have to bank those 2 points as long as they need to be in the position that they need to be in. But once they've done that, once they've achieved that goal, I really hope that they will be aggressive about resting some of those players so that they will be ready for the run. Because if they can get through the East, and if they can get all the way, if they can actually win an Eastern Conference final, then the narrative changes on this team. And I think we're all ready for that narrative to change. So I hope they will do everything in their power. Since the deadline wasn't really part of it, I hope they will do everything in their power to make sure that they have the best team going into the playoffs that they can. Apart from that, the only thing I'm looking forward to once the playoffs start is that I think, Katie, you're going to be wearing pigtails.
I very well could be.
There you go.
It's coming.
That's fun. Well, I think you're onto something as well. And you look at, the Canes they're firing all cylinders. They're not changing the lineup in any way, so there's no reason for it not to continue. They could bring up a guy like Noah Philp. They could bring up Charles Alexis Legault. They could do any number of things, as you say, and they've got the depth to do it. So I think unless injuries strike, I think the Canes are probably going to be in really strong shape. And the interesting thing right now, of course, is that they're only 1 point behind Dallas. So, they're third overall in the NHL. If they get ahead of Dallas, guess what? The only team that would have home ice advantage on the Canes at any time would be Colorado. So somebody else beat Colorado, the Canes would have home ice advantage if they came out of the East and so on. So ending up as high as they can is a big difference for the Canes because, of course, they're deadly in Lenovo Center. So, you know what? Hey, today was interesting. I'm not that concerned about it. I like what the Canes are doing. I think they're playing just fantastic hockey, and I look forward to seeing them up close and personal next week, and I'm sure I'll have some funny things to say when I get back, and I hope to get together with some of the Caniacs while I'm up there and share some stories, and I'm sure that will be interesting. In any case, as always, ladies, it was great fun talking hockey today, and we'll be back in a few weeks, and we'll continue to share our thoughts about the Hurricanes and what's happening with the Canes at that time. In any case, for those of you who've been watching or listening, we're delighted you spent time with us. If you like this episode, please press the like button. If you have any questions or comments, please put those in the comments section. And of course, if you want to be alerted of future episodes of Storm Tracker, please press the subscribe and the bell buttons, and you'll be made aware just as soon as they're available. As always, Erin, Katie, and I are delighted you spent time with us and look forward to getting together with you real soon, right here on Storm Tracker.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends for everything with the Canes. You need Storm Tracker.